Trying to make more sense of your family business? Let's talk about it.
Welcome to another episode of Making Sense of Family Business. I'm John Camfield, the Family Business Solutionist, broadcasting from Melbourne in Australia. Today I'm going to be talking about the birth order lottery or birth order dynamics. And why? Because although it's talked about in terms of sibling rivalry and so on, we don't very often go very deep into the topic of the impact that birth order, the chronological sequence of birth into a family, has on the dynamics of the family and ultimately on the conflicts that some families get themselves into. So if we can help to get a better understanding, we can then help to improve the way we manage the conflicts. If we can improve the management of conflicts, we're going to have much more sense in our family business. Birth order lottery is not a complex concept, but it is a powerful one. It has been said that your birth order lottery is a lottery you don't remember entering, where your siblings all think you've won more than you deserve, but that's only after they've stolen your ticket. It's a confused area and it sort of flies under the radar a bit in a lot of family businesses. But what the psychologists have told us very clearly is that birth order has an enormous impact on the social, emotional development of family members. And it also has a significant impact on the structure and functioning of a family if they don't respond in appropriate ways to accommodate the differences in personalities and the like between children. It has been said no two children in the same family ever have the same parent, because when child number one is born, it's a first child. When child number two is born, he's born to experienced parents, totally different to child number one. The economic circumstances, professional positions and all the rest of it may have changed. So child number two comes into a different family with very different parents. And child number three is a whole extra layer of complexity. And by the time they come along, parents can be a little bit over-parenting. They're certainly not nearly as nervous because they're old hands at this now. And they may even delegate a certain amount of parenting to the oldest child. So again, the way that child is interacted with within the family is going to be very different to, say, the firstborn. Now, one of the things that psychologists again have identified is that children, like tribal members, very actively engage in what's called niche picking. Everybody needs to find a place for themselves to occupy that is them. It is their identity. This is who and what I am. This is where I fit. This is what I do. This is how I do it. It's a level of certainty, a level of surety, and it means that individuals carve out and occupy a space in the family or in a social group or in a community that is unique to them and is comfortable to them. And if they are in a place that feels appropriate, they feel quite comfortable in their own skin, they're where they ought to be. If they're not in such a place, they feel quite uncomfortable, and that can have an impact. So, although there are lots of stereotypes in this space, it's worth thinking of how does this usually work out? And we can tell from observation. The firstborn child in a family is often quite adventurous, quite decisive, quite responsible. They may be quite loyal. They may make good leaders because the expectation is always on them that they will be leaders because they're the oldest child. And in some measure, their personality grows into the expectation built around them. Contrast that with the middle child, who everybody thinks of as a little bit meat in the sandwich, the lost soul, the ones who are not Arthur or Martha, They may themselves feel as though, I'm not the oldest, I'm not the youngest, where do I fit? And they can often create fictions, or it may be reality, that they are overlooked because the oldest, being the trailblazer, gets a lot of attention. The youngest, being the youngest, is the cutest. They get a lot of attention. And where does that leave the middle one? A little bit like the proverbial shag on a rock. So they then will often invent a role for themselves, which may be the negotiator, communicator, mediator between the other siblings or between the siblings and the parents. And they can develop great skills of tact and diplomacy because they get plenty of practice in that particular role, whether anybody wants them to do it or not. One of the problems that we then have is they will often form coalitions with a weaker family member against a bully. Now, the bully may be an older or a younger child, but they may be a bully, and the middle child may form or take the role of rescuer to protect the victim from the persecutor. This is the classic Karpman drama triangle developed by Stephen Karpman, and he made the point, this is not really who they are, this is simply a role they have adopted to give them a relevance in the family, and maybe so they can just be useful and build strong relationships. The problem with it is that by doing that, it forms a rotating dynamic which may actually feed the conflict rather than resolve it. Because they're not there to resolve, they're there to rescue. And their role is to rescue, therefore they almost want the bullied family member to continue to be bullied, to continue to give them relevance. And so they actually contribute in some ways because they often generate conflict to give them an importance. The youngest child, by the time they arrive, everybody is pretty chilled. Parents have done it before. The older children are a number of years older. They've gone through the baby stage and all the rest of it. So the youngest child often grows up being very adaptable, being very sociable, fit in where they can. They can be quite fearless because there's always somebody around to catch them when they fall and to protect them. So you can see the massive difference between the types of roles each take, the personalities that are going to form to give them a space in the family hierarchy. Now, one of the things that becomes very interesting here is that we see in families something that always looks like DNA cloning, where as part of this niche picking process, you may find one child is fantastic at marketing, a second child is a brilliant engineer, a third child is much more comfortable doing the accounts and the administration, and a fourth child is the front-facing customer relations. Completely different skill sets. And you look at families, and if you've got 2, 3, 4, 5, even 7 children in one case, every one of them seems to develop a different skill set to enable them to function with their own particular role within the family. And it's quite extraordinary to see, and it's part of the reason why I think a lot of families are so effective, is because the kid, if they manage to leverage their diversity, all of their needs can be covered by people who are doing things that they are well suited to do. So that's the background. Why does the birth order create conflict? Well, there are things called habitual relational scripts, which mean that patterns of behaviour develop as habits, which means that the family member works on autopilot, and that is with a certain level for each one of dominance, compliance, nurturing, negotiation, collaboration, rebellion, etc., etc. And they form this to manage the interaction of family members when they're little, and then that may move up with the same dynamic unchanged as they become adults, and even more so if they then flip into a family business at a later stage. Of course, the processes and the behaviours that worked in the playroom may be utterly, and probably will be utterly, inappropriate in a business context. So that can create a lot of problems in the business. It's often the case that the firstborn, particularly in traditional families, is expected through right of primogeniture to be the one who takes over the family, the business, the leadership, the first child, particularly if it's a male child. There's an expectation. It is often not the case these days, when things are probably more democratised and where there's certainly a lot more opportunity for females to take the lead. But there's also more of a drive towards recognising merit rather than a right of birth giving people the entitlements. So that's a problem that often leads into succession issues if mum or dad or both saying Billy is going to be the leader because he's the oldest, where Billy and everybody else, and particularly the siblings, know that he is not the best candidate for leadership, and he may even himself recognise that, but he's not pushing back against the parents. Now, the middle child in that situation is doing the Cartman triangle stuff, the peacemaker, the rescuer, and all the rest of it, and in that process they can be increasing conflict between family members rather than reducing it, because they're not trying to resolve, they're trying to rescue, because that's now their role. So it's in their nature, as a habitual script, to keep on doing that, which is unhelpful to everybody. The youngest may end up with a bit of a last in line syndrome of thinking, I'm the smallest, I'm the least, I'm the spare, think Prince Harry, and I resent the fact that where I think I'm actually pretty good, I'm never going to get my shot at this. And so they can become quite rebellious, they can become quite disruptive, they can demand things which can destabilise the business and create problems in the family as well. Overlay on top of all of that, favouritism. There is hardly a parent on the planet that won't say, I love my children equally, and there's often a but. Because some children play better to the parents, some children are more admired by the parents, and some children are simply seen to be the favourites or play to be the favourites or manoeuvre to become the favourites, and they attempt to lock in a lot of parental support. We often see coalitions of, it's often sons with mothers, daughters with fathers, and particularly as they get older, that can create very big problems in a family business, particularly if that family member has not had much to do with the business where other siblings have, but the favouritism of the parent says you've got to have an equal share of ownership or you've got to have an equal share in decision making, even where they might not know anything about the business or have any relevant talents or skills. That can be a problem because it's interpreted not as equality, which is fundamentally, that's what it is, but it's not seen as equity. It's not fair, it's not logical. We'll talk about that in a later episode. But it makes no sense to the people who need to get the job done that somebody who is not qualified is brought in, and it's the parents trying to do the parental thing of being fair, but to them on the deck it's anything but fair. And that's then seen as favouritism because it's an unfair, unreasonable, illogical advancement, and what could it be other than the parent prefers that child to me? So that creates lots of problems, lots of angst and lots of conflict. What do we do about this? How can we prevent the birth order lottery creating problems for us in the business in combination with lots of other stuff that's going on? The first thing is that parents need to start early with play learning and teaching kids about place and space, personalities, diversifying, teamwork, all of those sorts of things. So it's not a question of saying, I need to sit in this pigeonhole and that's the only way I can be relevant, but it's saying I have a place, I am valued, there's stuff I can do. I need to work out what my talents are, what my preferences are. I need to work out how to work with other people and be a good team player rather than just a fierce competitor. It's useful again at really quite an early age to bring in concepts of proper family business structure. So there's not simply an entitlement based on age preference about how things should work, but there is a logical framework for the family business and a logical framework for the family. This is who is best to do these things that need to be done, therefore they're the people who are doing it. There's no preference or anything, we're just making smart decisions here. So all of this leads to having plenty of family talk. Families in business need to talk. Whether they're working in the business or not, they need to have opportunities, and this is what a family council can do or family forums can do, opportunities to talk about stuff that's going on, opportunities to talk about things in the family that are being transferred into the business or are not being transferred into the business but can blow up and cause problems. We might need to do a certain amount of coaching, we might need to do some mentoring, we may even need to do some family rituals to deal with problems from early traumas, playroom stuff, bullying from older children to younger or younger to older, and we may need to address those things in later life because they are causing conflict and problems for us now. Don't avoid them, don't deny them, identify them, deal with them, and if you need help, ask for it. There are people who can help. If you found this video useful, please give us a like. Please pass on the details to anybody else who you think might benefit from it. And we look forward to seeing you back here again in a week's time. Jonk, the Family Business Solutionist. Thanks for watching.